What happens when someone in human resources is looking for a job in HR and the tables are turned and you go from being the interviewer to the interviewee? With me is Tony Schwab, who was recently looking for an opportunity, right, in human resources, and you found that opportunity. And we had a conversation about why you were looking for that opportunity, what that process is like on a number of different levels, and I want to peel back that onion. But the conversation started with how sales skills apply to finding a job and how these ups and downs of looking for a job apply the same to anything, whether you're self-employed looking for clients or whether you're looking for a job or if you're sales looking for prospects. So first tell me what you did, a little bit about yourself and your background in HR.
Yeah, I've been in the industry for 20 plus years. You know, people operations around recruiting, human resources. Just the general people industry. So started out military recruiting, about 10 years in healthcare, 10 more years in IT, and now I'm back to healthcare again with my new opportunity. So kind of did that my entire career.
Looking for opportunity, just always doing HR.
Always doing, third party staffing and recruiting, and then transferring over to HR within like the last 10 years.
So you did that in the military?
Yeah, I did military recruiting for the Marine Corps. It's
Okay.
actually how I got into the industry. I was in a temporary active duty, and the gunnery sergeant that I was working for referred me to a former executive officer that had been in charge of the recruiting depot in Pittsburgh. And I joined, he had started a commercial company through a leadership development program that this organization had done to recruit prior military officers. And so interviewed with him, early stage, first professional career, and was with the company for 10 years. And he was a major mentor for me throughout the beginning stages of my, career.
That's interesting. Now, when you joined the military, did you have aspirations of getting into HR? How did HR become a thing for you?
No, it was something, that temporary recruiting duty, the Marine Corps, does a lot of really dedicated training, and they actually use selling skills, something that we talk about. The Xerox
Yeah.
PSS, professional selling skills, was the methodology that they used. And talking about, sales being communication, it got me thinking about things that I had been doing personally where I was like, I'm a good communicator and, working through, the recruiting duty with the Marine Corps, getting connected with this job. It became something that really just evolved my career. It was one of those finding, something that you're good at. And I was, ironically, and you run into this a lot in the recruiting industry, I was a biology major. A lot of people that I, talk to in the business, have that in their background, and it's just kind of an irony. But just, stumbled upon being good at that. The recruiting division that I was with was very successful. I found a passion for it and really enjoyed the early stage of my career. And then once you develop that experience, you start looking into other opportunities that you might have. So, evolving into human resources became greater interest, really getting into the details of compliance, culture, the employee experience. Those were things that really started to intrigue me, like from being the coaching aspect and really having an influence and a seat at the table to guide a business. Started realizing that, people make up every single company, whether it's a manufacturing organization, a services company, whatever it may be, and really having that influence and contribution to the company to help with the people and driving the organization was something that really became a passion for me.
Yeah, I never really thought of it as a coaching thing, but yeah, you are. You're really setting the tone for the culture, and you're working with people, helping people get along, which is what HR is all about. Let's go back to you found yourself in a position looking for an opportunity in HR. So did you have any insight? Did you use any insight being someone who recruited and hired? Did it help you in this process, having been on the other side of the table?
Yeah, I think it did. It's always tough when the shoe's on the other
Yeah.
on the other foot, but I definitely, I think that those things help. But the emotional state that you go through when you're a job seeker is the piece that you don't think about, or don't, when you really feel that the circumstances that you go through as you're looking, the emotional roller coaster that you go through when you're job hunting. That's the aspect that becomes a little bit more personal when you're on the other side.
Yeah.
Not that you understand that and you empathize with people as they're going through the job search, but some of those things become a little bit more real when you're going through the search yourself.
So is it fair to say that because of this process, it maybe helped you a little bit? Maybe you matured in
Yeah.
your process, now having a little more recent insight? So
Yeah.
as opposed to having been in HR for so long,
Yeah.
not having touched that side of it.
Yeah, I think so. I always had a passion for empathizing with the job seeker and stuff, and so the amount of experience that I have, I always really prided myself on thinking about the other side. But once you're in it, it definitely gives you a different perspective. So I think it's helped for sure. Changed a few thoughts. I mean, everything that you go through is a new learning experience. So every experience helps enhance. And I do really want to use, the experience that I had recently with this situation to help job seekers and create a good candidate experience, a good employee, like I said, candidate and employee experience through the whole process that I went through.
So when you started and say you left the Marines as a recruiter and you got into the job you previously had in that opportunity, how have things changed from when you looked for that job to looking for a job now? What avenues do you have? Is it very different? Because I know when you look back to when I was first looking for a job, there is nothing like that now. I mean, there was no Indeed, no Monster, nothing. There was like you get a resume typed out and you mail it. So how is it different now?
I mean, it's just a world of difference. Everything that we've seen evolve in the technical world has impacted everything that we do, and in this experience, this process as well. I mean, I can remember early stage career and, you laugh that people, would, especially like different things that we did in business. There was like faxes. You could fax a resume and hope that somebody picked it off the fax machine, and that would be a differentiator. I mean, that little things like that. So the commonality is always trying to set yourself apart or to put a spotlight on your candidacy or your resume or your experience. So that part has stayed the same, but the amount of tools and stuff that we have available, I think, has drastically evolved. I mean, like you said, all the different job boards, LinkedIn in and of itself being just, such a big component to the whole process.
Yeah, I mean, tell me, there was one that you said you stumbled on. There was an opportunity where you said, well, I'll give it a shot. Was it like a Craigslist or something? You said you found something so ambiguous it wasn't in the mainstream, but it turned out to be something more because they were trying to be discreet about putting the word out there that they were looking for somebody.
Yeah, I think that looking at the content of the job is important, diversifying the search and looking at, a lot of different job boards. I think it was just one that, that I might not have considered going to as a primary. And I've, found opportunity through that. So definitely, I think, you can easily become habitual in going to the same systems over and over, and trying to diversify that, I think, was the takeaway that I got there. Is you never know. Sometimes it could, if you're looking at the content of the job and it seems to be a good fit, I think it's, good to explore different opportunities, and that, something like that had come up in that situation.
Is it fair to say that when you're looking at this from a sales point of view, and you look at trying to get a job at a very large company, will be just like trying to prospect a very large company. Sometimes you want to find someone because maybe that familiarity helps you. But now that there are so many, it's almost a numbers game, or it's a data game where your resume is analyzed without a person looking at it in a lot of cases. And that's not something I was ever up against. When I sent resumes out, people read them, and there was a cover letter they read. But the process is very different. So do you see a big distinction between maybe if I want to go to a large company with a lot of employees, is that a different rat race? Because because they have so many people looking to get a job there, you're just a number. How do you beat that data game if possible, or can't you because it's such a big company?
The numbers, is a challenge. I mean, even looking at remote opportunities, if you think about it, you'd be competing in your local market for a job that you had to drive to. Now, from a remote perspective, you could be competing globally,
Right.
or at least nationally, at a minimum, for the most part. But that's a big impact. I think that, having any type of differentiator that you can find, a lot of times recruiters will, ironically, I've seen this trend recently where they will notify you that they are the recruiter responsible, and you can connect with them. You can, try to attempt to message them. A lot of, maybe that's if you're applying directly within a company's job portal, But then if you're applying to job boards, there's instant messaging, options, meaning like a messaging, tool that you can submit to the recruiter. And not everybody might be doing that. And so, that recruiter or that hiring manager might see a message and it sparks an attention to your resume. The next thing you know, they're clicking on your resume, they're looking at your profile in more detail as opposed to people that aren't taking those steps. I think the interesting thing is some people might, maybe think everybody's doing that, but in reality, there's a high probability that they're not, at which point it could differentiate, your profile.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like, again, going back to the sales process. If I were in sales, I know that my best leads are probably coming from someone I know, and I have an in somehow, and that the least probable is probably a cold outreach. So I would think that if I'm looking for a new opportunity, my best bet is to go to my first network. When you get a job at a certain company, say you're a financial planner, first thing they have you do is call everyone you know for that reason. Now, when you started looking for this process, you did something on LinkedIn that was unique because you wanted to reach out to your network and leverage your network. And did you do that? And tell me about that process, and did it help?
Yeah, I'm very thankful for the years of connections. And, as we know, time goes on, you can't keep in touch with everybody. So sometimes those relationships are a little bit more dormant than you would want them to be. And, I threw a message out just being a little, humble and saying that I was in the process of a transition, and appreciated any support that people might be able to offer, whether that be just, communication, networking, opportunities. Didn't really expect it to, necessarily be, an actual job offer or anything like that. But any amount of support that I could do to just refresh my network and reach out to people that I had these valued relationships with. So, just drafted a little note and put it out there. And, the response was humbling, to say the least, of the people that reached out and forwarded it on to, colleagues and other people. And, not only the reactions that I received to the direct post, but also the impression uptick that it had in my profile on LinkedIn was really, once again, super humbling and very beneficial as I continue to push forward in the search. So it was a big springboard of activity for me. And, I don't know, sometimes it feels like one thing leads to another, a lot of interviews that occurred after that. And I felt like the cadence of responses kind of picked up. It may be the algorithm that we hear about,
Right, yeah.
just throwing your information out there. But I think those impressions, which correspond to the amount of times that post was viewed or opened, was significant to, showing the activity and some things that helped me in the search for sure. So I think we have these relationships, we have these tools for a reason, and using them can really be beneficial.
So how did you feel when you first made that post? Because a lot of people would think that's revealing too much. It makes me too
Yeah.
vulnerable, because it's almost like you're asking for help. But when you actually have the courage to do it, what happened? Did you have any reservations about initially doing it?
Yeah, for sure. It's an emotional experience to be seeking employment and, putting yourself out there with a message like that. But I had faith that, it was the network that I knew, and I thought it just kind of, it was going to prove to be beneficial. And, it did. It rejuvenated relationships that were dormant, got me in touch with people. But you definitely have to, there was an emotional thought there, and just vulnerability,
Right.
really. But I think you got to take a chance to get one. And,
Right, right.
even as we talk about the correspondence to sales, it's just doing things with good intent, reaching out. I knew that there was a support network out there for me, and it was really helpful, not only in the short term, but I really think in the long term with, like I said, I keep mentioning the relationships that were reactivated and connections remade, and then, finding an opportunity and posting out that you're thankful to have, received a job. I mean, people were, it was equally as supportive at the beginning of the
the end,
process as it was afterwards. So it's encouraging to know that people are out there to help, and it's rejuvenating to let you know that you can help people as well, when they're reaching out, for support and assistance. And it's nice to see that system being used for those types of purposes. I think that, the amount of networking and support that we have at our fingertips, a lot of times you hear about the negatives of different tools or computers and it
Yeah.
taking away the personal relationships. And I think it's the opposite. If you foster, the personal relationship in addition to the technology that's out there to help you, stay connected with people. It can be a really beneficial circumstance.
Now, when you did that initial outreach, do you think are you going to change the way you maintain personal relationships now? I mean, we talked about how maybe I shouldn't let people get so far away next time. That maybe while I'm at this opportunity now, they're working another position, that I should do something to regularly keep in touch with people. Just like if you're in sales and you want repeat work, you want to kind of touch your network, ping them a little bit more than you used to. Did that come to thought?
Yeah, it comes to thought just like it sounds kind of funny, but even just personally, it lets you know just keeping in touch with people. I think that once again with technology, sometimes we devalue, oh, it's just a text. Sometimes it's nice to get a text or a message, from a former colleague. Hey, haven't talked to you in quite a long time. And it's really nice, to be able to do that, when you're at a state where it's where you're not looking, not that there's any intent behind the messaging, but I'm just saying in general, when you come across a profile to send out a message to somebody, I think that we need to understand the person on the other side of that message may really value hearing from you, that you thought about them and you let them know that. And I think the more we can, try to implement those best practices in our life professionally and personally, I think there's a lot of benefit to that.
Yeah, I think now that we have all these social media platforms, just staying in touch with people and responding to something they post, or just
Exactly.
whether it's on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, just using that leverage to kind of like, I'm still here, we're still talking, engaging in a conversation.
One of those things that if you think it, you should just type it, and
Right.
then they know. You might be reading content, you're busy, it's tough to always reply, and you can't do it all the time. But I think that if you find that moment when that thought is there, to send out that message or whatever, like you said, sometimes it's as easy as a reaction to their post is beneficial, and it could be helping their business. You don't realize if it is something an event they're promoting or a business update or a success. Those likes we know turn into impressions, or those reactions turn into impressions. And as we've said, it's beneficial for me to help. So kind of returning that favor is helpful. Typing a quick message is even better, I think, because it gets
Right.
even more of a response, and you're really helping. For all intents purposes, you're supporting their business, and I think that's a nice gesture for us to do when you can find the time amongst our busy
Right.
schedules and busy days.
That's the tough part because you want to when you've got a position and you feel like you're locked in, your first impression isn't to keep in touch with people other than what your agenda is for your job. But then you may want to take 10, 15% of your time and say, okay, let's do some networking and refresh some relationships and use that as part of what I do every day. Just a little bit tagged to say, even though it has nothing to do with my job right now,
Right.
nothing to do with anything I need right now, but just to thank someone, congratulate someone, say hello to someone. I heard about this, I heard about that. Just those constant little trips help salespeople, and it helps you find a job.
Yeah, blocking your day early in the day, maybe doing it over lunch or at the end of a day, and being intentional about it, not just
Right.
consuming the content. This content's out there. It's a network, somebody that we might be connected to for a reason and from our past. So, throwing out those gestures, I think it's really kind of the new, I guess you could call it modern way to support people and businesses. And I think that it's sometimes overlooked how exponential that type of support can be.
When you're in this last position, again, relating this to sales, I posted something on LinkedIn about this. I posted a poll, and I'm always talking about how, there's the high percentage way of getting a sale or getting a connection, and the low percentage way, and we know that cold is out. It's not what you know, it's who you know. And I said, and I posted, and I got a bit of a mixed review, but a lot of people seem to favor when I asked the question, is it helpful to know someone in a business somewhere as opposed to someone who doesn't know someone? Do you have any advantage? Like if I was looking for a job where you worked, now we weren't as close as where we work out in the mornings. We see each other almost every day. But if we weren't that close, we were friends and had a connection. And we had a personal relationship to a certain degree. Would that give me an advantage?
I think that it does. I think that the networking, naturally, organizations still have to go through their normal vetting process and requirements around the roles and whatnot.
Right.
But having a short list referral and networking and having that, once again, differentiating your profile, whatever you can do to get your resume out of the masses is beneficial, and having that connection, is the most direct route to do that. So I think that networking, having the connections, even knowing the recruiter that's responsible for the job gives you a direct point of contact all of a sudden. So, the old school way was you could actually pick up the phone and call in, try to find out who the hiring manager was, possibly even show up at the companies in their lobby with your resume in hand, and sometimes you could get an interview out of it. And so I think that all of those things are very similar to knowing people in a different way. Knowing people and they're getting the referral definitely gets attention to your profile, and then everything else has to sort itself out. Are you the right fit?
Sure.
Is it a good match and stuff like that? But it definitely can help get the attention onto your credentials.
Now, you talked about having more empathy in this process, that you've been through it. And we talked about some things, and something happened between you and I, because we had talked about ghosting and how salespeople get ghosted. When you're a salesperson, you get ghosted when you think you're ready to close a deal. Everything looks great, and then you don't hear anything. And then someone says, well, how often should I call this prospect? It's just like that with a job search. And when I texted you, it was something to do with this podcast. I sent you a text, and I forgot I sent it, but it had been a couple days. And it was shortly after we talked about ghosting. I sent you a text, hey, man, are you ghosting me? Because
I was. So,
I know. That was it. I'm like,
but then when I got caught out, I was
mad at me?
embarrassed.
I'm starting to project. Is he mad at me? Did I say something wrong? No, that was
Did
one
I
thing.
lift more at the gym?
I know.
The deal?
He saw my deadlift, and it was bad. He wants to hang around people that lift heavy. So I thought that's interesting, because you mentioned a couple of times there were a number of opportunities you had where you thought you were there, and then you got ghosted. And then you found out they weren't really ghosting you, but it was just this emotional roller coaster, you said. What is that? How long should someone wait to hear back from someone? And what are ways to get in touch when you feel like you've been ghosted?
Yeah, I mean, the magic question that, between sales and job interviewing, and I even have people, knowing that I'm in the industry, say, how long, is too long? And the answer is you never know. It could be longer than you expected. A lot of the processes go at the normal cadence, but I think, taking the emotion out of it is the first key, is not trying to read into it. And that's very difficult to do when you're seeking a job and you need a job, and, you're just anxious to get back to work, and everybody goes through this at various points. I think that having, one is setting an expectation with the interviewer is the ideal situation, similar to sales, kind of checking for acceptance. When will I hear back? What's the timeline look like? And we've all heard those types of, those pieces of advice.
It's just like closing. You want to make
Just
sure
like closing.
how motivated are you?
Yes.
When can I circle back? The one buzzword
Exactly.
words that no one likes to hear.
So if you have that established, you could even say, when would it make sense for me to follow up? Right. And if you could get that feedback, it's ideal. Otherwise, it's using your judgment. I always believe in just a general rule of escalation of communication is you send out one, softer touch, just checking in. It seemed that this was a time frame that made sense for us. Then you kind of escalate it again, with a different type of message, and changing it up, trying to add value to the content that you're presenting when you're requesting the information. And then when you get to the stage where you might be getting ghosted, maybe throwing caution to the wind, and in all seriousness, maybe just asking for closure to the opportunity,
right.
Maybe for advice. Hey, seeking advice. I'm not sure if this is still open. Just, doing
but
things.
Professional closure.
Yeah,
Not like
exactly.
as some people, you said you might get emotional. Like, listen, I spent this
Right.
much time doing it. I've been to interviews.
Right.
You should never get to that point, no matter
Correct.
how angry
Yeah.
you are, how much time you have invested in it. And
Exactly.
you feel like you've been robbed of an opportunity. You should still be professional. Then you
Yeah.
should always, like salespeople, they say, always act like your pipeline's full. Like don't pretend and mislead people. But like, I got a whole bunch of stuff going on. Tell me if I'm in or not. You should still be authentic, but the whole time you should still always be professional, even if asking for closure a couple of times.
I think in all that messaging, it should come from a place of sincerity and saying, this is something that's really been, high on my interest level, and I'm just looking. That's definitely like closure, like you said, professional closure to the opportunity. Is this still open? Should we still remain in contact? And a lot of times, if you ask for that, people will realize, hey, I need to let you know this is still extended. It's us working through the process, not you. Hang tight and we'll be in touch. So changing that messaging, being sincere about your approach, staying consistent with it, and using your judgment as to, how frequently that should, I think, we all know how often it probably makes sense, but hearing it from, from them ahead of time is helpful, because then you can just follow that timeline. And, a lot of times I'll throw that out, and it's kind of a nice two-way street for communication. On the opposite side, from me, on a professional standpoint, as I'm developing a relationship with a candidate through the interview process, I'll say, hey, let's work together on this. If you don't hear from me by this date, let's either, feel free that you could reach out. It's probably a good time for us to touch base, or I'll be reaching out to you if I hear something sooner, or as a fail-safe at that point to give you an update. That way we'll keep the process moving forward. So in going back to that empathy piece, that's a sign that this might be a good opportunity, that the or that the company's communicating with you, setting expectations, setting a follow-up. As we're evaluating employee culture, that might also be an indication that there's an expectation, there's transparency there. And so, when I talk to candidates about that, again, on the professional side, a lot of times they're very appreciative. Hey, that's really helpful. And then when they reach out, I give them the respect of an update because they've done their side. Or if I know sooner, then I reach out to them. And that two-way communication really keeps things moving forward. So that's another thought process as you're evaluating culture and opportunity is, we don't want this to always be one-sided. And the sign that the employer is doing it, or, supporting the follow-up, is a good circumstance too for us to keep in mind.
Yeah, which brings the empathy thing comes to mind. When you're sitting in, you mentioned, you reach out and tell them, hey, checks and balances. If you don't hear from me, and that between the lines is a sign of decent culture, like a sign of a company you may want to work for. Which led me to another question: that if I'm sitting in an interview with someone, what are fair questions for me to ask you about culture? See, my mind goes back to, if I'm thinking in terms of sales and I'm talking with you and I want to turn that into a job, I want to find out who worked here last and why did they leave? Because I want to find out what you need and if I'm a good fit. Because I'm not just hoping you hire me. I want to know if this is a place I want to work. That should be equal. Although a salesperson wants to sell, wants to make money. The person seeking a job wants a job. There's some financial strain and they want that job. But at the same time, take away the sale and the benefit of the sale and take away the reward of getting the job. What do I need to know to make sure this is a good fit? Even if I need money now and I want to get paid as a salesperson and I want a job because I need to pay bills, what are some questions I should confidently ask to determine what the culture may be if that's a place I want to be?
I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. Whatever is important to you is a question that's fair to ask, and the employer, should be reciprocal in giving you that response or that feedback. And, I think, the ones that you referenced there, ironically, it's not a stage that is a step that's done all that often.
Yeah.
Like you said, maybe there's a sensitivity circumstance there, but I think it shows genuine interest. I think that it shows forethought from the candidate to be thinking about that. And I think, whatever is important to you that you've learned makes you succeed in your job. And I don't, want to be too ambiguous with those questions, but I think it's really specific to the individual of, like you said, what, maybe with people that have transitioned from this role in the past, what were some of the things that they did well? What were some of the things that they struggled with? What would be my greatest challenge in the short term in taking on this role? What would, kind of flipping that a little bit to the positive of is what is the greatest impact that I could have if I were to join the company or be selected as a candidate? A lot of times they'd be telling you what the company needs at that stage.
Right.
And then you can evaluate, is that something that I can offer? Is that something that I'm really strong in? Is that something that I'm going to need a little bit of ramp up time with? Which, if the previous person didn't have that and I need to ramp up on it, it might let you know that could be a challenging state for the short term, if that makes sense, where it's a developmental need. But and it might just lead to a follow-up question of, what would the expectations be so that you could understand what you would need to do. And there's always, you could begin to prep or plan mentally for that circumstance that you might have to be ready to execute on. So there's a lot of things that would let you know what you should, could expect in the role. I mean, all the way up to and including asking for, a shadow day. Do you mind if I do a quick, sit with some of my peers for an hour or two? I mean, a lot of jobs will ask you to come in for a shadow day, and I think that it's fair for the candidate to ask for that
Yeah.
as well.
Excellent.
So yeah, I think there's a wide range of stuff.
What's the best advice you could give someone of all the things we talked about and all the things you've seen where candidates fall short? That's pretty common. What advice would you give someone? They were so close, but they're missing something, but something you see might be missing from the average person looking for a job. What's the best advice you could give someone looking for a job in this market right now?
I think always looking for differentiation and always looking to focus on your attributes, your successes, and what makes you unique, and trying to bring that to the forefront as much as possible, whether it's optimizing your resume to highlight strengths, whether it's reaching out on like I mentioned, a messaging system within whatever application you're working with to say, hey, this is why I feel that I'm a good fit. And then it points the recruiter to, look at your resume and identify where is that at. And one good friend that as I was going through the search kept reminding me of the video game where you're just one axe hit away from hitting the gold
Right.
treasure, and realizing that it's just focusing on your strengths and your attributes, what you bring to an organization, being sincere about your interest in what they're offering you in a role. Once again, I know that's kind of high level, but I think that
Yeah.
those are things that, ironically, the reason it's important is because you think that people are doing it, but they might not be. They're going through the motions. Well, I applied to a lot of jobs. I sent my resume out there, but people aren't responding. You really have to become emotionally invested. And then your emotional investment becomes apparent to, the company, the recruiter, the hiring manager, and they realize there's something there, somebody that, would be a good fit for them culturally, somebody that's shown enthusiasm, and somebody that's just truly excited to be working. And, I think, as funny as that seems, I don't know that that's always apparent on the other side when, the hiring manager or the company is looking at those profiles. So seeing somebody that's just eager and trying to display that, I think can really set people
Yeah,
apart.
someone who's motivated, I would think that becomes apparent to the person doing the hiring. If you
It's
can
like,
at least I can sense your motivation. Maybe on the emotional side of it, maybe instead of the word emotional, you should probably say demonstrate your motivation,
right,
because we want to keep even keel. And you can be emotional, but as long as your emotions don't make decisions for you.
passionate.
Passionate, yeah.
It's
Passionate
just
to
like the
show.
person that would show up in a lobby with their resume and their briefcase in hand and say, I'm ready to
Right.
work. It was a differentiator. And, looking for those unique, I think so often we get, I don't know what the word would be, like almost methodical about using a system, and you feel like you're doing a lot of work. But in reality, you're just kind of like, I guess I said it earlier, going through the motions and trying to find, unique ways to set your profile apart, which we do in sales. Try
Right.
to add value through, the benefits that we might be offering and the services that our business has. And
Yeah.
so I think treating ourselves like a little mini business and displaying those skills. Like I said, that's kind of a higher level thing, but I think that what I find is not everybody does that or takes those extra steps.
Right.
We just think, well, it's in the system, they probably won't look at it. A little, unique, clever message might catch a recruiter's attention. They say, oh, all of a sudden who's this person? They click at the resume. As a matter of fact, it looks like really good, skills and experience.
Yeah.
And
A little research on who you're trying to attract or trying to get the attention of. There's usually a human somewhere in there, finding someone who knows somebody who may know somebody that can give you an edge. But yeah, it's when you're a real estate agent and there's 50 real estate agents in the room, how do you set yourself apart? You don't just sit and wait for the phone to ring. You have to think and be on your toes and look for something to set you apart.
yeah, going back to the sales, example is if we just sat there and just kept picking up the phone and nobody's answering, but I'm making a lot of phone calls, it's
Yeah.
probably not going to get us the results we're looking for. So what else can we be doing that is part of it, going through those steps. I think, taking those actions and the initiative to do that, but then maybe throwing something else into it to separate yourself is, the greatest piece of advice. Being vulnerable, throwing a message out there, and having, your network work. All of a sudden you have people, helping you. You have that at a company. As a matter of fact, somebody that I've worked with in the past, know and respect, is looking for an opportunity. And, taking those little extra steps, I think, can go a long way. So, I think that's evident to the companies to show that passion is really important.
Would you think it's good advice for someone who's looking for a job to explore improving their sales skills?
Without a doubt, there's a lot of tools out there for communication, and whether it's through the interview process, through the written application process, I think, going back to the Marine Corps, that was, kind of the foundation of my, people career of being into people operations and human resources. It opened up a whole new light, just changing the thought process around, you know, you hear, even in, you and I talk about this all the time, just in everyday communication of the, I don't want to be sold. And it's like, if it's
Right.
a consultative process, it's just empowering people to make a decision. It's not necessarily, you know, coercing them to do something that they didn't want to do.
Yeah, persuasion. I don't think persuasion is making someone do something they don't want. Persuasion is helping them understand what they really need and
Exactly.
putting them where they want to be. I
So
think that's, yeah.
absolutely, there's crossover in what we do on a daily basis, whether it's presenting a topic in a boardroom of, something that we're advocating for, in my realm, it's for employees or our culture, things that are going to help the company or the business move forward. You have to have a compelling case and, features and benefits to what you're presenting. And so if you can, develop those skills and use them in everyday life, I think that's a really important attribute and very positive trait to have.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to come on
Yeah.
here and sharing your expertise. There's a lot of people looking for work, and I think any little bit can help. And I hope this helps somebody getting on the inside who's hearing from someone who's been on the inside, out on the outside, and back on the inside again. So
Yeah.
thank you for taking the time to come out
Thanks for
and
having
share
me.
this with us.
I hope that it helps.
Thanks, Toby.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, AJ.